Let me start by asking you a question. Are you a bit in the dark about what your wedding will end up costing? That you may even end up, like some couples, with a huge debt that you'll have to spend years paying off? Well, if it's any reassurance, you're not alone. Cost blowouts are the number one fear couples have when planning their wedding. In fact, according to Bride-to-Be's latest cost of love survey, the average budget Australian couples set for their wedding is $31,125. What they think they'll exceed their budget by is $5,052, or 16%. But what they end up exceeding it by is $34,232, or 109% over what they originally budgeted for. So they're looking at a total wedding cost of over $65,000. I'm Janet Hogan, co-founder with my partner Ralph of Botanica Weddings, and our mission is to help as many couples as possible have the wedding of their dreams without having a financial meltdown in the process. And that's why we've put together for you how to avoid the great wedding cost hangover. So we can share with you some of the knowledge we as a business have gathered over the last 8 years over the next 30 info-packed minutes. Before we begin, I'd like to say a big thank you for making the effort to join us, because I know how busy you are, and that's why I'm totally committed to making sure this webinar is worth every minute of your time. In how to avoid the great wedding cost hangover, I'll be showing you how to adopt the right money mindset to get the outcome you want, how to set your budget, finding the funds for the wedding you want, the difference between going for the cheapest wedding and getting real value for money, and finally, some great money-saving tips. Now, you may be asking yourself, why do I need to know all of this? Because unless money is no issue for you, if you don't have a realistic idea about what you need to spend, planning your wedding is going to be a constant source of stress for you and potentially cost you thousands of dollars more than you ever intended spending. You only get one chance to get this right, and there's so much at stake here. This is your wedding day. It should be a day that you can look back on with absolutely no regrets. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping you get it right. Now, seeing that what's at stake is only one of the most important days in your life, you want to make sure that whoever you take advice from really knows what they're talking about, right? So before we start, let me quickly share a bit about who I am and what I do. Our business, Botanica Weddings, is today regarded as Australia's and now Bali's most reputable destination wedding organisation. We have offices in the Whitsundays, Australia, and Bali, where I'm talking to you from right now. We have over 25 highly trained and experienced people working for us full-time, and agreements in place with over 50 suppliers who we regard as the best in the business. Since 2008, we've planned and hosted nearly 1,000 weddings. And last year and the year before that, our flagship venue, Villa Botanica, was voted best venue in Queensland by the brides themselves in the ABIA Awards. But most important, we are really the only wedding specialists out there, in that weddings are all we do. So it makes sense that when you only do one thing, you tend to do it very well. Now, I know from my own experience 30 years ago how a beautiful, well-run wedding can be the real turning point in the lives of two people and create the foundation for the great marriage that we all aspire to. So creating life-changing weddings for as many couples as possible has become my life's work. And that goes whether you book with us or not. Currently, we can only organise 200 weddings a year in Bali and 160 at our venue Villa Botanica in the Whitsundays. Any more and our standards would be at risk. So when we're full, we are full. But our mission is to ensure that every one of you who's taken the trouble to plan your wedding properly has the amazing experience you deserve without it breaking the bank. And this webinar is the first step. So fasten your seatbelts because we're going to be covering a lot of territory in a very short space of time. And for those of you who stay till the end, I'm going to be offering something very special to really kickstart your wedding journey. So don't bail out early. Before we continue, please turn off your phone, close down your Facebook. If you remember what a pen and paper are, have them at the ready to jot down questions, and let's begin. Now, there's only one way to ensure you won't overspend on your wedding, and that is to change your money mindset. Now, here's the curious truth. If you want to save money on your wedding, you're actually going to first have to be open to spending more, not less, than you were originally hoping for. Because I can tell you for sure, no wedding ever costs less than anticipated. And if you're stuck on an unrealistic figure, you're bound to actually end up paying out a lot more than you tried to save. Now, this may sound contradictory, but if you allow the fear of, oh, what's it all going to cost, dictate every decision you make, you'll attract the kind of people who offer too good to be true prices and don't deliver. When you become so scared of overspending and being ripped off that you only focus on price, it's just too easy to get lured in by those ads that advertise a whole package for a couple of $1,000s. This is a system that's designed to get you locked in with a deposit and then milk every dollar out of you along the way. The too good to be true cheap entry price will soon be swamped by all the extras you need on top, most of which you only become aware of when it's too late to do anything about them. So I'll just recap. Be open to spending more and don't be fooled by prices that are too good to be true. To give you an example, let me share with you a cautionary tale about one of our very own team members who decided not to get married at Villa Botanica, understandably because it was where she worked every day for 5 years. Instead, she chose an island resort that was advertising cheap wedding packages starting from $2,500. So naturally, she expected that even worst case scenario, the whole wedding couldn't possibly cost more than the $15,000 she'd actually budgeted for. Now, instead, it blew out to just over $32,000. And this is for someone experienced with weddings. Now, you can see, looking at this graph, how she wasn't aware of these price hikes till about within 6 months of her wedding date. This is when all the upsells started piling up. And by this time, it was too late to get out of the wedding. But, perhaps the worst part was that she was left to do all the planning herself and was still being tapped on the shoulder for more money on her wedding day when it was too late to shop around. So for just 50 extra strawberries to serve with her champagne toast, she was charged $800. Now, when I read her email, I thought it must be a typo, and I was just so outraged that she'd be charged even $80 for just a few punnets of strawberries. So the lesson is, don't allow yourself to be sucked in by the big carrot of a small price. And don't be fooled into thinking that a cheap quote is in any way comparable with what seems like an expensive one. Chances are only one of them is telling you the truth. Now, the good news is you can stay fully in control of how much you spend and still have the breathtakingly beautiful wedding you always wanted without compromise. And I'm going to show you how. First, let's establish right here and now that the thing to identify is not the cheapest price, the very best value for money. It's like a menu in a restaurant. If a bowl of pasta costs $20 and the fresh lobster is $25, which is the better value? We recently surveyed our 2015 couples, and although 1 in 3 of them felt that our initial quote was higher than they'd hoped for, more than 98% said that after their wedding, it was totally worth it and great value for money. In fact, one couple even said we were too cheap. We send out a survey to every couple who inquires with us, and one of the questions is, what's the one thing that's most important to you regarding your wedding? And the answer that wins hands down is value for money, nominated by 57% of our couples, even ahead of great service and feeling unstressed. In other words, what's most important is knowing that by spending just that little bit more, you'll not only get the wedding you always wanted, but also avoid all the compromises you didn't. the negative memories you don't want to associate with this magical day. Simple but true. Taking your head out of the sand and setting a realistic budget up front and sticking to it is the number one way to save money on your wedding, because it gives you a lot of time to negotiate up front and means you aren't locked into that dreadful spiral of watching costs just keep adding up, which is no way to enjoy your wedding journey or the big day. Celebrating love shouldn't be about counting dollars, so get the figures worked out up front. Perhaps not surprisingly, setting a budget is the last thing most couples want to do. Partly because every wedding is so different, there's no such thing as a standard budget template. But most often because it's pretty much human nature to say, look, I'll worry about all that stuff later. The problem is, without knowing what's involved, cost automatically becomes the main decision maker. And really, that's no different from saying to a car salesman, I want a car, I'm not sure what type, but can you give me a ballpark figure? And we get that question asked of us all the time by brides. Can you just tell me what your weddings cost, without us knowing anything about what it is they actually want? So let's address the elephant in the room and work out what you need to budget. Now, I'm going to leave out engagement and wedding rings, your dress, and the honeymoon. These are more personal costs and are really up to you guys. So what I'll be focusing on are the mandatories, everything to do with the wedding day itself. And this is what I mean by the mandatories. So the cost of your venue, the cost of the ceremony, the celebrant, the documents and legal fees, reception food and drinks, your styling and decoration, all the things that go on the tables, flowers, etc., your cake, photography and videography, DJ and sound system, all your entertainment, guest transport. Quite often you have to actually look after the transfers to and from the venue, if your venue is in a location where taxis aren't readily available. And this one really you cannot overlook, the planning service. It really just shows how wedding day is not just a day, it's actually a period of time with many of our couples that lasts for up to 2 years, where we're actually guiding them every step of the way. This is a major part of the wedding, of course, all the months, even years leading up to the day. Now, if you don't want to be like the 22% of couples who really struggle financially to pay for their wedding, pay particular attention to what I'm about to tell you. We get over 100 inquiries every week from everything from 2-people elopements up to 1,000-person extravaganzas. So for the sake of convenience, I've broken it down into 5 budget categories. Now remember, our figures are in Australian dollars, so if you're used to dealing in US dollars, you need to reduce what I'm quoting by around 25%. And these numbers are based on 50 guests, which we found to be the rough average for a destination wedding. Okay, so at level 1, we have couples who want a wedding for 50 guests for less than $10,000 or around $7,500 US. Now, that I have to say is a very tall order, but yes, it is possible. However, there are some serious limitations that you need to be aware of. The best way to pull this budget off is to do absolutely everything yourself, or rope your family and friends into organizing it with you. And that pretty well means that you're better off doing it at home in your own country, so you're really conversant with pricing and suppliers and can bargain and shop around successfully and carefully monitor and control the outcome you want. I mean, that's what my husband and I did back in our young cash-strapped days. We had a fun but cheap wedding in my parents' beautiful backyard, back in the days when exorbitant airfares to have a destination wedding weren't really an option for us. But I have to add that trying to organise a wedding away, either somewhere exotic within your own country or even more problematically in a foreign country where they don't even speak your language, is, I hate to say, a total recipe for disaster. A bit like my temperamental recipe for Kahlua souffle. The risk that your wedding is going to wind up a major disappointment is simply too high. If you have your heart set on saying, I do, on a beach under swaying palms, you're far better doing it either as an elopement or a small wedding for a maximum of 15 people. And then just have a great post-wedding party back home for everyone else. Our level 2 couples have generally set their budgets somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000. Now, if this is you, chances are you already have a ballpark idea of the likely cost of your wedding and a definite threshold that you don't want to overstep. Now, this means if you're getting married in a developed country like Australia, where labour costs are high, you'll most likely have to compromise at some level. For example, settle for your reception in a restaurant or function centre. But, and this is the good bit, with this budget, overseas you can have something really, really amazing because your dollar buys so much more and the venues are so exotic. I'm just showing you some images here from a wedding that we provide in that budget range to give you some idea. So no matter how modest your wedding, it will of course be framed by a magical location, rich decor and exotic culture. And honestly, afford you the kind of wedding you couldn't even imagine having back home. Next, we have our level 3 couples who place great importance on quality and style and are prepared to pay for it. Now, these are the couples I often hear saying, oh, if the most important day of my life isn't worth it, what day is? Couples in this category typically value things like exclusivity, so a private venue all to themselves, menus that incorporate local ingredients, wedding suppliers who'll go the extra mile to deliver top quality products and services, plus lots of wonderful extra touches that make this the kind of wedding family and friends will be raving about for years. Now, for this standard of wedding, you'll be paying in the vicinity of $20,000 to $40,000, and that will equate to either a very stylish wedding in your own country or, if overseas, something really out of a fairy tale. Our level 4 couples love fireworks in life and especially at their wedding. They're all about showing the world they mean business and having not just an amazing celebration of their love, but also a lot of fun. They gravitate towards those venues that provide the scope to really knock everyone's socks off and usually include lots of wow factors, spectacular photo opportunities for both wedding album and video, live entertainment, fire dances, chopper landings, free-flow spirits, custom cocktails, and typically quirky extras, like food carts, gelato bars. These guys are generally double income young professionals and they're prepared to spend anywhere between $40,000 and $100,000 because they can afford to. And they see their wedding as an investment in fun for everyone else as well as themselves. And finally, our level 5s. These guys are off the scale when it comes to what they spend. In fact, with them, the more the better. I saw a wedding the other day, in fact, where the couple spent $200,000, and actually when I think about it, that was US dollars, just on flowers, flown in from all places of Brazil. So just the bridal walk alone was a huge, completely enclosed tunnel of incredible blooms, about 10 meters long. What they are looking for when they call us is to work with the best organizers and best connected experts in the business. So weddings with these high flyers can cost anything from around $250,000 to over $1 million, and really meeting a budget is the least of their problems. But fortunately, it really is possible to have a modestly budgeted wedding feel and look like $1 million, and it all comes down to great planning. So the first thing to do is agree together which budget category you guys fit into. Remember, this isn't a competition to see who can spend the most or the least. It's about working out the type of wedding you really want and then say, okay, now how are we going to fund it? So just have a look at those levels between level 1 and 5 and work out where you guys feel most comfortable. Okay, and like I said before, just be realistic about it. Don't go in with false hopes and then be disappointed. Okay, next, how are you going to pay for it? So once you've agreed together on your budget, you need to work out the best way to pay for it. Now, if you're like 90% of couples, you'll already have some money saved. So the first thing to do is to see exactly what cash reserves you have that you're comfortable setting aside, and do leave yourselves with a safety buffer for a rainy day. If there's a shortfall from the cost of the wedding you want, work out how much you can comfortably set aside every month and make up the balance. Now, you may be prepared to make some sacrifices to get to your goal faster. For example, according to the Cost of Love survey, 2 in 5 women would give up alcohol or chocolate for a year. Wow, I don't know that I could give up chocolate for a year. And 1 in 4 would be prepared to take on a second job to have the wedding they want. So, there are options like that where you can change your spending habits. So just ask yourself, what am I prepared to do to have the wedding of my dreams? If necessary, consider pushing back your wedding date to allow you the time you need to save. Now, some couples are booking up to 24 months out to give them more breathing space to save up. The advantage of this is it also locks in your wedding quote, so you avoid the customary annual price hikes. And this is a great tip to lock in that price up front. These days, 68% of couples pay for the entire wedding on their own. However, there are still 21% who are lucky enough to have some of the costs contributed by the bride's parents and around 10% by the grooms. So if you haven't already done so, sit down and speak to both sets of parents to establish who may be willing to contribute what. And look, I know you may feel a bit awkward about it, but remember, most parents do want to contribute in some way. And honestly, I think they'd be offended if you didn't include them in this conversation up front. 18% of couples pay the difference between what they have and what they want using their credit card, with an average of $6,033 being put on plastic. So just a tip here, make sure if you do put some costs onto your credit card that you pay it off quickly so this amount doesn't spiral with interest fees. And finally, about 10% of couples simply take out a loan, with the average loan amount being $12,583. So you can approach your bank for a personal loan or get a quote from a finance company. Just keep an eye on the interest rates and shop around, because they tend to be, same as for credit cards, much higher than your standard home loan rate. So once you've worked out a plan as to how you're going to pay for your wedding, you can start finding out what options are out there and what they're going to cost. Now, before you pick up the phone or hit the internet, here are some money-saving tips to help you prevent those potential cost blowouts. Number 1, insist and insist again on a pre-quoted wedding package. Now, as our Botanica team member found out, many wedding organisers advertise too good to be true prices to secure a booking, knowing they'll be able to build in lots of fat later, and usually when it's too late for you to get out of the contract. So to counter this, what you need to insist on upfront is a fixed package price, one that includes all the major costs. Now, if this seems too cookie cutter for you, remember, you can always customize it into your particular dream wedding by adding on additional elements like photo booths, fire dancers, live entertainment to make it special. But what will serve you best is knowing you have all the essentials covered from day one and that a proven system is being followed. And believe me, a negotiated package up front could save you anything up to $10,000. Number 2, avoid currency fluctuations. Firstly, if you're used to dealing in Australian, New Zealand, Canadian, or Singapore dollars, remember to make sure you're comparing apples with apples. Many wedding organisers and hotels quote in US dollars, which always seem cheap compared to a quote in your own currency, but can be hiding a 30% hike on the quote. And be very wary of currency fluctuations and getting your wedding locked in US dollars, because you simply don't know how much the US dollar is going to be worth compared to your own currency this time next year. And look, this happened with some of our own couples. When we started planning weddings in Bali, we did like everyone else and we quoted in US dollars. And then in 12 months, that's exactly what happened. The US dollar went up 30% compared to the Aussie dollar, and we had some very unhappy couples. And that's precisely why now we quote everything in Australian dollars. Okay, so honestly, paying for the bulk of your wedding in US dollars 12 months down the track could add thousands to your budget-priced wedding and make it more expensive than that well-priced, all-inclusive package you might have thought was too expensive initially. So if you really want to sleep well at night, the best idea is to ask if you can pay for your wedding in the local currency of the country where you're getting married. That way, any change tends to be minimal, or even better, in your own currency where there's no change at all. In a volatile currency environment, this alone could save you up to 30% of the total cost of your wedding. Taxes and surcharges. Now, this is a big one. Wherever you're getting married, make sure you find out what additional government charges like GST, VAT, and other forms of sales tax might have to be added on top of your quote. Now, in Europe, these can be as high as 25%. In Bali, hotels will add a plus tax of 21% to everything, so always look at the fine print. Better still, try and find a planner or a wedding organization who knows their way around and has structured things so these taxes are their problem and not yours. Avoiding extra surcharges and taxes could save you over 20% on the total cost of your wedding. Now, this one, not many couples do it, but again, it is a way of saving. Asking for a discount for upfront payment. You may be able to save money by paying for your wedding upfront. It doesn't hurt to ask, and it certainly does away with the headache of having to find the money later on. But just make sure if you do this that the company you're dealing with has a long-established reputation for fair trading and isn't going anywhere, namely belly up. I know in Bali, for instance, there are a lot of solo planners, and sometimes they've been known to just disappear. So you wouldn't want to be paying up front with one of those organizations, one of those people. So check that the booking form you sign is a legal document and most importantly will hold up under the laws of your country. Okay, so bank transfers, these can actually add up if you're having a wedding overseas and are having to send funds on a regular basis, to a whole bunch of different suppliers. Typically, a local Australian bank will charge you around $22 a transfer. So if you're having to pay multiple suppliers over many months, that could add up to well over $600. Finally, easier money management. Request a payment plan. Now, not many people have the 50% of their wedding bill in a biscuit tin under the bed, or have had the discipline to save it up. So I really think it makes sense to request a payment plan. And what that means is monthly payments that allow you to pay for your wedding as you go. If your organizer can't arrange this, then it's a good idea to set up a savings account through your bank where monthly installments are direct debited from your day-to-day account. A plan that breaks your payments down into smaller, more digestible amounts makes managing your costs a whole lot easier. And that brings us to the end of our webinar. Now, let's just quickly recap on what we covered. It went quickly, didn't it? We talked about the importance of having the right money mindset. Now, this means not letting fear dictate every decision, because then you'll only attract people who want to take advantage of you, but being open to spending more. So far better to be a realist and save up for a bit longer than an optimistic ostrich with your head in the sand and be paying off your wedding cost overruns for years. Then, how to set your budget. We went through the 5 budget categories. Again, agree together which one fits you best and stick to it. Then, finding the funds. How to pay for your wedding. We went through all the options to ensure you can afford the wedding you want. Savings, sacrifices, what are you prepared to go without, delaying the date, getting contributions from family members, and forms of credit cards and personal loans. It's all about knowing and exploring all your options, but importantly, not overextending yourselves. And don't be lured in by those ultra cheap packages. If it sounds too good to be true, then in this very poorly regulated industry, it probably is. There are lots of unscrupulous businesses out there who offer the bait of an irresistibly cheap ceremony price, and then as soon as they've signed you up, that's the last you hear of them, and that does happen. So understand the difference between cheapest and best value for money, and always go for best value for money. And finally, we gave you some great money-saving tips. Fixing the greatest part of your costs with a pre-quoted package. If you're getting married overseas, avoiding currency fluctuations. Being aware of taxes, surcharges, making sure you build those into your final cost. The cost of bank transfers. And looking at what your planner or venue or organizer can do for you in the way of easy to manage payment plans, and even reducing the price for payment up front. Your wedding day will undoubtedly be one of, if not the most important milestone events in your life. It creates the foundation for your marriage. It's the celebration of your greatest love. It's both of you taking a stand in front of the people who count most in your life. And honestly, you don't get a second chance to get it right. So whatever you do, don't underestimate its importance and don't devalue it. That's why I'll repeat what I said at the very beginning of this webinar. It should never be about the cheapest wedding you can get, but the best value version of what you want. This applies for your family and friends too. They'll be putting a lot of time and effort into coming to your wedding. What they want to see, first and foremost, is the both of you happy and relaxed. And they would prefer an experience worth traveling for. That means a wedding that's well run, at a spectacular venue, with great service, food and entertainment, and you both smiling the whole time. If you can pull that off, yours really will be a dream wedding come true. Now, very soon, I'm going to be offering you something very special, but first, as my way of saying thank you for making it all the way to the end, I'm going to send you a recorded version of the webinar so you and your partner can review it together. So, what's next? Once you're armed with information, it's human nature. The first thing you're going to want to do is go straight online and start checking out what's available. My last bit of advice today is before you trawl through many hours of your time sussing out websites and trying to compare packages, the best place to start is to talk to someone who's already been through the same process you're going through and can help guide you. Now, this is where that offer I mentioned earlier comes in. What I've shared with you today represents everything that we at Botanica Weddings stand for, and that is not simply taking your booking and forgetting about you, but guiding you step by step so you don't encounter any of the problems I outlined just now. So, if you like what you've seen so far and want to find out more, do take advantage of our free consultation service with one of our very experienced wedding experts. As well as being able to ask them all the questions you want, they can also take you on a free online tour of one of our typical destination weddings. So you can see firsthand how a perfectly run day should look. But do book yourself in, as their calendars fill up very fast. At Botanica, because we personally contact and advise every single person who inquires with us, whether they're interested in our weddings or not, so the opportunity to have a one-on-one consultation is limited to the number of appointments our team can physically fit in. But the fact that you showed up and made it to the end of this webinar tells me you're pretty serious about having an amazing destination wedding. So we'll do everything at our end to help you achieve just that. So there you have it, a free consultation and online tour. All you have to do is click the link that will appear on the email that we send you at the end of this webinar. So thank you again for joining us. I hope you've taken something really valuable away from today. But it's not over yet, because I know some of you have some questions. So we're now going live for questions and answers. Let me start by asking you a question. Are you a bit in the dark about what your wedding will end up costing? But you may even end up like some couples with a huge debt that you'll have to spend years paying off.